Hello and welcome back to Configure This Now. My name is Tim Haney, and in this video we're going to be going through the initial setup of the Aruba Mobility Controller. Just as a reminder, go ahead and turn on your YouTube annotations in case there's any on-screen corrections that need to be made after it's uploaded. Here's my standard disclaimer. You can go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read that. Here's my network diagram for the lab network that we're going to be doing all the work on today. I broke this diagram down in the first video, so I'm not going to go through that again. If you are interested in that breakdown, go ahead and check out my first video. I'll put a link on the screen for that. Here's the agenda of everything that we're going to be going through in this video. I'm also putting this agenda in the description to make it easier to search for in the future. We'll go over all of these things in real time. Okay, with that, let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open my Super Putty. Alright, Super Putty already has my serial port open, so I'll just go ahead and press enter. I'm plugged into the console port of LMS1. Let me just pull up the network diagram one more time. So LMS1 is this guy right here. He's the first local controller. Okay. You can see that LMS1 is prompting for a username. For the sake of demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and pretend that this is a used controller and we don't know what the username and password is. So we're going to do the password reset mechanism. Now, in order to do the password reset mechanism, you need to have physical access to the box because you cannot do it via SSH. You need to be plugged into the console port. So, to do the password reset, when plugged into the console port, we're going to use password as the username, and then the password is forget me bang. Let me type that out. That's forget me bang, just like that. Go ahead and press enter. Okay, and it brings us to the prompt. I'm going to enable, and the enable password when you're doing the password reset mechanism is always enable. Okay, and there's really only one command I'm able to do when I'm doing the password reset mechanism. Sorry about the warning there. The command that I am able to do is management user. Oh, of course I need to be in configuration mode first. So, management user followed by the username admin, and the role name, we're just going to make it a root, which is a super user. Okay, go ahead and press enter. The new password is going to be admin123 with a capital A. Admin123. Okay, now I can Control Z to go back to exec mode, and then exit to go back to the initial prompt, and exit one more time to go back to the login. Now I can use admin123, and I'm back in. Oh, and the enable password is still enable in this case. Now you could have changed the enable password during the password reset if you wanted to. Just go back into configuration mode and enable secret. I'm just going to set it to admin123, admin123, just for the sake of demonstration. Okay, but like I said, we're pretending that this is an old controller with an it's already been used. It has some configurations already on it. We want to start absolutely fresh. So that brings me to the next point in this presentation. There's the good old write erase command. You'll probably recognize that one because it's similar to Cisco, but there's also a different one, write erase all, and I want to go through the difference between those two and give you an important warning. Okay, go back to my presentation. So the warning about this regarding write erase all, if you issue write erase all, it's going to delete any installed licenses on your controller. So if you're going to use write erase all, go ahead and do the show license command, back up the license keys so you have them available, issue the command reload, and then you can reinstall the licenses after the reload. The good thing about write erase all is it's going to clear all of the databases as well. so there won't be any leftover junk when you go ahead and reset. Usually you can just get away with issuing write erase. Won't be very much of a problem. But if you really want to start absolutely fresh, as close to a factory reset as possible, use write erase all. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do here. Except first, I'm going to show license rather. Okay. I see I have 3 expired licenses here. That's from a previous lab that I did. Really, I'm only interested in the permanent licenses, which are these 3 keys right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy those, put them on my clipboard so I have them later. Now these keys are only good for this exact controller with this exact serial number. They wouldn't work on any other controller. So now that I have those, I'll go ahead, write erase all. It prompts me to say yes if I want to, so I go ahead and say yes, and I'm going to reload. And now we're just going to wait for the system to boot, so I'm going to pause the recording and come back when it's fully booted. Okay, so at this point the controller has fully rebooted and I'm at the initial setup wizard. Again, I'm configuring this from the console port. There is another way you could configure this, and that's by assigning yourself a static IP address, plugging directly into the controller on one of the Ethernet ports, and actually doing this through the GUI. But I actually prefer the command line. So this is running a relatively new version of AOS right now. So depending on your AOS version that's on the box, you may or may not see this initial set of lines asking you to do a full setup or mini setup. In fact, the initial setup script is going to look a little bit different, you know, depending on which version you run. So let's go ahead and do a full setup. Yes. Okay, let's give this a name. Again, we're on the first local controller, so it's ctn-lms1 is my host name. Now, even though this is a local controller, I'm going to actually assign it as a master controller right now, and I'll show you why later. I'll accept the default for the IP address and subnet mask and gateway because it's on VLAN 1, and I'm going to change that anyway. I'm going to turn off IPv6. I'm going to set this to the US country code. Confirm. I'm in the Pacific time zone with an 8-hour offset, so that's fine. I'll change the time if I need to. I'll change the date if I need to. Admin password admin123. Admin123. Enable password is also admin123. Admin123. And do I want to shut down? No. Okay. Now, at this point, I could go ahead and say yes and accept all my changes. I could say no, and that will, I could say no, and that would restart everything. But I just want to point out a couple other things. Actually, I skipped over it. So here's a way to navigate through this script. You can actually say, for example, Control P will take you to the previous question. So, for example, Control P, and it will back up through all these questions that I just did. But I'll go ahead and go forward through them again. I can also say Control I, that'll take me all, well, I'll say no. So that takes me to the beginning. I'll fly through it this time. And you can also use, let's see, there it is, Control X to go back to the beginning. I think that's what the command I was looking for. I just forgot what it was. Master, don't care, don't care, don't care, no, US, yes, don't care, don't care, don't care, admin123, 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 no. This time I'll accept the changes. Okay. Now while that reboots, it takes about 5 minutes to reboot. I'm going to go ahead and plug into local controller number 2 on the console port. Press enter. It's prompting me once again how I want to run my setup. I'll say full, yes, and I'll fly through this one as well. ctn-lms2, leave it as master, accept the defaults here, no IPv6, US country code, yes. Not going to change anything about the time. admin123. Yes, alright, so now at this point those two controllers are rebooting, so I'll pick up this presentation once they come back online. Okay, my controller is fully rebooted now, so I'm going to go ahead and log in. Okay, and I'll enable. Alright, so let's go over the navigation. So you'll find that the Aruba controller command line is very similar to Cisco's. You've got your question mark, context sensitive help. If you type a partial word and then a question mark, it'll give you suggestions on what that could be. You have your show commands such as show IP interface brief. Unlike Cisco, however, this will only show interfaces that can have an IP address assigned to them, so it won't show all of the interfaces like the gigabit interfaces and so forth. You also have show run, which is also similar to Cisco. During the show run, we can either page through this, or if you type a slash, notice down here at the bottom, I typed a slash, and I'll just search for something like, how about authentication-server. Okay, that didn't come up in the list. How about, let's try that again. I'm trying to think of a good example here. How about AP-group? And it will jump immediately to where AP-group starts in the config without breaking, without interruption. So that's good for navigating around if you're looking for something specific in the configuration. You can also do the pipe include and the pipe begin commands. So for example, show run pipe include 0/0/0 or pipe begin 0/0/0, and then you can just navigate from that point on. There is no pipe section command, which is a difference between this and Cisco. I wish there was a section command, but there's not. Let's see what else. I put my cheat sheet up here so I wouldn't forget anything. Tab completion. So really, when it comes to completion on command completion on Aruba, anytime you hit the space bar, it's going to complete for you anyway. You can, so if I type configure and hit the space bar, it will auto-complete to configure, or the tab key. I can also do shorthand. I don't have to type everything. Interface gigabit 0/0/0. Let's say I wanted to instead do a range command. I could up arrow and do interface range. Now it's not going to auto-complete that time. Gig 0/0/0 to 0/1. Now I'm in the range anyway. Control Z to back all the way out. I can also do, let's see, I'll go back into interface range, and when I'm in the command mode or configure terminal mode, I can type a bang that will back out by 1, or I can type exit that does the same thing. I can exit out of here, configure terminal, go back into here. If I type end, that's the same as Control Z. It takes you all the way out back to exec mode. Tab completion, show IP interface brief, show run. Okay, so that basically covers the navigation of the CLI. So let's start doing some real commands here. So the first one I'm going to talk about is enable bypass. Okay, that command is going to allow root users to not have to type in the enable password. So depending on what your security policy is, you may or may not want that, but I usually turn it on because typically if a user has root privileges, it's not going to make much difference whether or not they need to type that enable password. But if your policy requires it, you don't need to use that one. Let's set some timeouts. So login session timeout 0. That's going to give me an unlimited timeout for the CLI. That's applicable both for the console port and SSH sessions. And then for the web interface, web server profile, and then session timeout 3600 is going to be the maximum. That's in seconds, so that's basically, I think, 60 minutes. And you can't do an unlimited timeout on the web server. Okay, timeout. So now let's set up our basic routing and switching. First start with VLANs, so VLAN 20, and I'm gonna, now at this point I could either press enter or I can type in a description. So I'll give it a description: CTN dash master controller management. VLAN 30 is CTN dash, what was it, wired. VLAN 40 is CTN dash voice. CTN dash corp Wi-Fi. VLAN 60 is CTN dash guest Wi-Fi. Okay, that's all my VLANs for this particular controller. Let's see, and if I do show VLAN, it will show all of those, including the description that I typed. You'll notice that I did a show command directly from the from config. I don't need to type the word do like you do on Cisco. You can just type any show command from this exact point. Okay. All right, let's do the VLAN interfaces. So interface VLAN 20. I'm going to put an IP address of 10.0.20.2 with a /24. No shorthand on the subnet mask, unfortunately. Okay, let's back out. Well, I want to stay in config mode though. I'm going to turn on jumbo frames. So a couple things about jumbo frames. If you're able to use them, according to Aruba, you might get a 10 to 15% performance boost, because the size, the maximum size of a Wi-Fi frame exceeds the standard maximum size of an Ethernet frame. So if that could result in fragmentation. So if you enable jumbo frames, you're not going to have fragmentation, but you do need to have jumbo frames end to end. Now, for me, this means I can't go through any layer 3 hops, because my switch does not support jumbo frames across layer 3 interfaces. So for that reason, I'm going to be having my access points in the same layer 2 domain as my management interface. That will allow me to take advantage of jumbo frames. So I'll turn it on the controller. Firewall, jumbo, MTU 9000. If I don't specify the MTU, it'll just automatically accept the maximum. However, my Cisco switch has the largest MTU it can do is 9000. So just be aware of what your infrastructure supports. And remember, this has to work end to end. So if you have multiple layers of switches, you have to consider the fact that every switch has to, you have to turn on jumbo frames on all of those interfaces. And in the case of my Cisco switch, it required a reboot. So keep it in mind. I'll go into the interface now. So interface gig 000, turn on jumbo. Same on gig 1, jumbo. Okay. Bang to back out. Okay, now you might ask yourself, why didn't you just do a range command there? Simple. Interface gig, oh, sorry, range gig 000 to 001. Oops. Let's talk about the range command. There is a very specific syntax that it wants you to follow here. Slot, module start, port start, followed by module end, port end. So you'll notice I tried 000 to 001. That didn't work. That's because I need to do 000 to 01. Okay. Now these port numbers are going to differ depending on your platform. If you have an older platform, it might be just 1/0, but the newer ones I think are all 000 as the beginning port number. Okay. So now I'm in the range. Can't do jumbo as a command there. Not sure why. However, I can specify that I want to turn on LLDP, LLDP transmit, and LLDP receive. Okay, port channel. So now we're going to put these two interfaces into a port channel. So let's say LACP group 0 mode active. LACP is the only port channel negotiation protocol that the controller supports. So if you have a Cisco controller, obviously you can't use PAGP, and you can't do you can't turn negotiation off. You must use LACP negotiation. Okay, so that command took. Let's go ahead and assign. You know what? While we're still on the port channel configuration, let's get this out of the way. Interface port channel 0. Let's do show run begin port channel. Yep. Okay, port channel is in default state right now. How about I'll put the trunk commands on there. Switch port mode trunk. Again, very Cisco-like. Switch port trunk allowed VLAN 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 7, oh, not 70. Okay, now I'll do show run begin port channel. Okay. Actually, for comparison, I'll do begin, I think it's 17. Yes. You'll notice on gig 0017 there's a default command trusted, but when I created my port channel, that trusted command did not get created. If you do not put that trusted command on there, your users are going to see a message that says something like web authentication failed or something strange like that, because essentially without that trusted command, it's treating it as though it needs to be a firewalled port. So let's go ahead and make sure we say trusted. Now, just because it says trusted VLAN 1 through 4094, that's not good enough. You actually have to type the word trusted. Okay. Now, just for review, I'll show it to you again. Now you can see the port channel is trusted. Okay, I'm going to put some descriptions on there because descriptions are great for documentation directly in the command line. So for the port channel description, we'll say, now what I've been doing is labeling them according to what they connect to. So in this case, it connects to CTN switch 1, port channel, and this is LMS1. Let me double check my diagram. So LMS1 goes to port channel 1 on the switch, and I'm just going to put in the management IP address of the switch as well, just so it's easy to see. Okay, now you'll also notice that I surrounded these by quotes. If you can do a single word, but if you want multiple words separated by spaces, you need to do it in quotes. I'll also put a description on my VLAN interface. Interface VLAN 20. Description. Management IP. Okay, and lastly, on my physical interfaces. So interface gig 000. Description. CTN switch 1, so my 000 goes to 104. And again, the management of that device. I use the up arrow to quickly go cycle through my previous commands. Now I can go to gig 1, up arrow again, and this is going to go to port number 5. Okay, so now I have descriptions. I have it on my physical interfaces. I have it on my port channel interface, and I have it on my VLAN interface. So again, great for quick reference when you're actually at the command line. Next, let's see, let's set the default gateway. The default gateway for this controller is going to be on VLAN 20, and the IP address will be, first of all, IP default gateway 10.0.20.1. Show IP route. You can see my gateway of last resort set to 10.0.20.1 now. Okay. And spanning tree. Alright, so let's turn the spanning tree feature on with the command spanning tree. Let's set the mode. Spanning tree mode rapid. Actually, I'll do a question mark here and just show the difference here. So there's two supported spanning tree modes, either rapid or rapid PVST. Rapid is the industry standard 802.1W, and that's what Juniper will support. Rapid PVST is what Cisco will support. So I'm on a Cisco switch. I'm going to do rapid PVST. I don't know why the controller doesn't support MST, since that's really where the industry needs to go because of the flexibility of the greater cost numbers when running spanning tree. Okay, so you might think at this point I've turned on spanning tree and I've set the mode, so it should be running, right? Well, no. I don't know why you have to do this as well, but if I do show spanning tree, well, that's not very helpful output, is it? You actually have to turn it on for every VLAN that you want to run it on. Okay, so I can say spanning tree VLAN range 1 through 4094 to turn it on, right? No. Looks like it's going to get cut off at 65 if I do show run pipe include spanning. That's good enough. You'll see it turned it on for everything through VLAN 64, which tells me that this controller will only run spanning tree on up to 64 VLANs. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Hopefully you're not running 64 VLANs on your Aruba controller, but just keep it in mind. And every platform is going to be different. Some older platforms might only support 32, or possibly even less. Just depends on what your what model you're running. So I'm going to negate that previous command with no. Okay, hopefully that took. Show run include spanning tree. That didn't quite take. Let's try it again. 1 through 64. Okay, how about 11 through 64? Some real-time troubleshooting here. Alright, so 12, 13. Alright, we're going to do this a little bit different. Find what? Spanning. Replace with no spanning. Copy all these. There, problem solved. Now we're going to actually turn it on the correct VLANs. Spanning tree, VLAN range. Let's do 20. You can do commas and hyphens here. Well, just trust me, you can do commas or hyphens. But 20, 30, 40, I want to include VLAN 1. Now, I'm not going to be using VLAN 1, but just in case, somebody plugs into an unused port and no shuts it, by default it's on VLAN 1, so we just want to make sure it's running on VLAN 1, just in case, since you can't remove the VLAN. So 1, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Okay. So now I have turned on all those VLANs, and if I do show spanning tree VLAN 20, now we actually get some helpful output. It's not as helpful as, for example, Cisco's output, but I can at least do show spanning tree. Let's see, interface, I'll actually say port channel 0, and it'll tell me how how spanning tree is running on that exact port. So at least you have that to work with. Okay, that covers spanning tree. I covered all that. Okay, the banner. Now you might think, okay, well, setting a banner, that's not a very big deal, right? It's just a simple command. I can look that up in the documentation. Well, I have a big warning about that one. Login banner. The login banner has a maximum width of 255 characters per line. Exceeding 255 characters per line will overwrite parts of the configuration. This has bit me in the butt before, okay, because I had a very long banner. I didn't notice the warning that it gave me about the 255 characters. And it wound up just completely destroying parts of my configuration, and that was frustrating. Okay, so I also have a few recommendations on here. You should actually limit this to 94 characters per line for best appearance on the web admin. That I found by trial and error. And then these other couple ones about the asterisks and line break. So I'll show you, I'll describe each one of these and why I have them. So here's my banner. The command, well, I'll type it into SuperPutty here. So banner, MOTD, and the delimiter I'm going to use is the tilde. Okay, now it actually gives you the warning that I completely failed to read the first time I set this up. And I'm going to just copy this in here. Okay. So, I have my row of asterisks. Nothing is longer than 94 characters, and I have a line break at the bottom. Okay. That's a note that I made on my slide here. I don't think I mentioned it, but I have a line break on the bottom. So let me show you why I have those three recommendations. Let's see, just show IP interface brief. So we have our basic routing and switching set up. At this point, I should be able to reach the controller ping. I have a DNS entry for this. Let's see, CTN-LMS1. Yes, okay. Okay, admin. And right here, it gives me the login prompt. Now, if I did not put that line break at the end, it would have all these asterisks followed immediately by admin at CTN-LMS1 without the line break. So just keep that in mind with the line break. Admin123. Show you the exact same thing on the console port since it's a little bit different. So admin123. Now this time, it started putting in the banner immediately after the password. So that's why I made the line of asterisks, because it's good for appearance here. Okay. Otherwise, it would just start, it would say password, a few asterisks, and then start into the banner, which looks a little ugly. Okay, and lastly, CTN-LMS1. Oops. Okay, and here's my banner again. Now, if I did not adhere to my recommendation of 94 characters, you would see a little scroll bar down here, which would force you to actually scroll over to see the entire message. So limit yourself to 94 characters and you'll be just fine. Okay, so that's it for the banner. Pull up my cheat sheet. Let's see, banner. Okay, now, all of the following things I'm going to talk about require a reboot. Okay, if you do them. First, let's set the clock. Clock is set in exec mode. Clock set, let's see, year 2016. Month is November. Day is 18th. Hour is, it's 4 p.m., so that would be 16. Minute is 42. And second, I'll just say 0. Return. So this is going to require a reboot, as I mentioned. Want to continue? Yes. Okay. Now the reason for that is a couple things. One, it's to prevent you from taking advantage of trial licenses. So if your trial or your evaluation license is coming to an end, theoretically, if you just reset the clock, then you could make it never end. But this forces you to reboot. And second, so when IPSec and IC negotiation, they kind of rely on the timestamps, so that would break that communication. And IPSec is important here because it's going to be used for communication between the master controllers as well as for communication between the master controllers and the local controllers. And the reason we're using IPSec is because we are going to have some sensitive data, such as shared secrets for radius or TACACs, or WPA passphrases. Let's see what else. Let's see, infrastructure. Well, oh, and any IPSec pre-shared keys. Well, scratch that. Obviously they need to match on both sides. But basically any sensitive information such as the radius and TACAC shared secret or the WPA passphrase, since that's sensitive information, it does need to be encrypted, and we don't know if we're going to be going over a WAN or anything, so IPSec is used between the master controllers and between the master controllers and the local controllers. So I definitely went off on a bunny trail there, and I'm going to basically give this same explanation when we get to the master controller configuration as well, but it doesn't hurt to learn a few things along the way. Okay, I had to pause the video recording there because I got interrupted. So where was I? I was talking about the setting the clock. Okay, we set the clock. I'm going to set NTP, so NTP server is actually running on my router 1, which is this guy right here, my Cisco 870. And NTP server is 172. I wonder if I can use DNS here. Nope. 172.16.0. What is it? 1, of course. Okay. Kind of the same warning that I just gave. NTP. Alright, so one more clock command is for daylight saving time. So clock summertime, and the name of daylight savings time zone when it's in effect is PDT, Pacific Daylight Time, as opposed to PST, Pacific Standard Time. Recurring second Sunday of March at 2 a.m. to the first Sunday of November. Let's give myself a little more room. Oops, I closed it. That's okay. We'll bring it back. COM1. Alright, there we go. Second Sunday of March, first Sunday November at 2 a.m. with the offset of -7 hours. Okay. And if we do show run pipe include clock. So there's my 2 clock commands, and I can do show clock. And it's roughly accurate right now, but it will it'll get more accurate once the NTP is fully running. So I can also do NTP commands. So NTP peer. Let's see if that works. I didn't actually do this during my dry run, so I'm not sure if it works or not. Well, you can take it for what it is. Remote host there has a little bit of some information about NTP. Okay, let's set the domain name. IP domain name is, sorry, I had to check something. Example.com, and the, let's see, DNS server, IP name server is 10.0. Let's see, 30, no, not 30, 70.3. Okay, that's the IP address of my Windows server. And these things are really true. Operation may not take effect till reboot. I actually did a packet capture where I set the DNS server, and then I tried to change it after it had been saved and reloaded. And even after I changed the DNS server, it still tried to use the old one. I could see that in the packet capture. So just keep it in mind, it does require a reboot. So I set the domain name and the DNS server. So this is a local controller. I need to point it to a master controller. And for the master controller, we're going to point it to the virtual IP address, okay? The VRRP address. Now, if you only have one master controller, then you can point it, to the physical IP address. But I have 2, and hopefully you have 2 as well. so you can point it to the virtual address. And the command to do that is master IP, and followed by the IP address, 10.0.10.4, IPSec, key admin123, and that's good enough. Okay, now you can see there's a couple other ways to get the to get that up and running. You can do certificates, but that's a little bit more complicated. It's just much easier to use an IPSec pre-shared key. Okay. Now that's, since I don't have the master controllers all the way set up yet, that's not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to show anything between the master and local statistics, but when we get to that point, I'll give you the verification commands. Okay, next, the controller IP. Controller IP VLAN 10. What is the controller IP? It is the IP address that all management and control traffic is sourced from. Okay? Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, hey, these controllers have a management port built into them. Can't I just use that? Well, first of all, that's not even allowed to use that as the controller IP. And second of all, let's go to the next warning here. The management interface. The management port of the controller uses the same routing table as the standard data ports. There is no way to put the management port in its own VRF. Okay? So as I have everything typed out here, you know, setting default gateway in the subnet of the management interface will cause asymmetrical routing and prevent proper use of 10 gig interfaces on high-end platforms. And obviously asymmetrical routing is something we typically want to avoid, and those high-end platforms definitely you want to take advantage of the 10 gig interface rather than everything just going, you know, even if it comes in on one IP address, it's going to go back out on the 1 gig management. So you can get around this a little bit by using a static route, but you need to know exactly which subnets to put into those static routes, so it may or may not be useful. Me personally, I don't find the management port to be very useful for this exact reason, but you can take advantage of it if you think it's helpful. Just keep in mind the limitations. I know with Cisco devices you can SSH directly from the Cisco device, so if your out-of-band network has the Cisco default gateway on the VLAN where the management port lives, you can SSH directly to that, but again, that's a little bit wonky, so take it for what you will, and we'll just go ahead and move on. Just keep in mind all control traffic is sourced from this interface. So I've set it to VLAN 10. That's going to be control traffic to the master controller, control traffic to the APs, basically everything. Okay, it's verifying I want to actually do this, so yes. VLAN 10 IP address is not, okay, I meant to say VLAN 20, because this is the local controller, not the master controller. Okay, great. Let's see, controller IP. Alright, let's do a firmware upgrade. Go back to exec mode, copy FTP, and this is the IP address of my computer, 10.0.30.2. User is Tim. File name. Let's see, go to my downloads. So I have my FTP server application sharing my downloads folder, just to make it kind of simple, and let's see. How about I just type it like this, 6.5.1.1. So this is the firmware that I want to be running. So actually I want to show you a couple other commands before we do this. Okay. First two commands are, let's see, show version. Okay, you can see we're running 6.5.1.0, but I want to run 6.5.1.1 instead. And show image version. Okay. This will show you the operating system images that are available on the system right now. You can boot to either one of these, but neither of them are the one that we actually want. So I'm going to copy FTP 10.0.30.2 tim. Before we start this, let me pull up my FileZilla server interface so you can see this. As it happens. Tim file name is, I think I just copied it. Yes, I did. System partition. Now, I could just press enter here and it will copy it to partition 0. Or if I want, I could copy it to partition 1. But I'll just allow it to go to partition 0 and the password, which I set up on FileZilla server. And you can see the transfer starting, and it should end very quickly. Okay, and it's all done, so it needs to copy to flash. This takes a little longer, so I'll go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so it's done copying that to flash. Now if I do show version, again we're still on 6.5.1.0 because we haven't rebooted, but if I do show image version, we can see that on partition 0 we've now copied 6.5.1.1, okay, and this is where it's going to boot next time it boots up. Okay, so the next thing I want to actually show is where do you get the images. So we have to go to the Aruba support site. Give me just 1 second. I want to make sure I'm all the way logged in, and I want to hide my screen. Okay. So first of all, you go to support.arubanetworks.com. You're going to log in at the top right with your Aruba account. Now, assuming that your Aruba account is authorized to download Aruba OS images, you can click on the Download Software tab and navigate through the tree. So Aruba OS, you can pick either general availability or early deployment. So general availability is what's recommended for most production systems. The only time I would recommend that you run early deployment is, well, 1, if you're in a lab, or 2, you have new hardware, such as a new controller or new access points that actually require the later version. In that case, you have no choice but to choose the early deployment images. And then you can just go down, find the one that you want, download it here. It'll go, into your downloads folder on the browser. Okay. Okay, we went through firmware upgrade, so let's add some licenses. Now remember, this controller, I copied some licenses, and then I did a write erase all. So if I do a show license right now, nothing. Okay, but if I take these, I'll say license add. Okay, I'll put these in. Alright, now again, it says that you need to reload. Let's go ahead and show license, how it stands right now. You may or may not actually need to reload on this one, and that is a bad thing, okay? Because the PFNG license, if you add it to a live network where you already have users attached and you suddenly add the PFNG license where it did not exist before, you are going to drop all of your users, okay? Or at least they're going to be black holed. Okay, so make sure that this is done during a maintenance window. If you already have a live controller without the PFNG license, you can put a couple lines in here. If you find yourself in that situation, you need to assign a permit any to the AAA profile and then do a AAA user delete all. Those are, the AAA profile is something I haven't gone into yet, but I'll just, for the sake of demonstration, I'll show you a couple things here. So, show rights. This shows us all of the user roles that exist on the system. Let me restart this because I want to make it prettier. Prior to the installation of the PFNG license, you would have all of the user and system ACLs. Let's see, it doesn't even show the ACL. Let's see. Okay, correction. You would have all of the system ACLs. You would not have the user ACLs, such as authenticated. This is actually one continuous line. It got cut off. Okay, the user ACLs are session-based access lists, and because they're session-based, let me start that thought over. Okay, the user roles are require the PFNG license because they enable the session-based firewall. Okay, now if you're rolling along and you don't have the PFNG license, and you're operating, well, like a Cisco wireless controller at that point, and you enable it one day. Let me just show you something here. Show AAA profile default. The default settings for a AAA profile is that your initial role is going to be logon. So what does that mean? What is the logon role? Show rights logon. Okay. Now this is this access list is a abbreviated way to kind of get an idea of what's going on here. So it's RA guard, logon control. Let's actually look into the details. It's going to break all of these down. So I'm going to skip over RA guard. Logon control is going to allow you to do ICMP, DNS, DHCP, and it's going to disallow certain types of addresses like Class E IP addresses. And it'll have the captain portal. But that's it. That's all the user can do with the logon role. All right. They won't be able to do anything else except what is specified in this logon role. And that's what I mean by it's going to black hole all of your user traffic. So to get around that, go into the AAA profile. AAA profile. It may be called something else. I'm just going to type test. Let's see. I can't do that because I'm not on a master controller. Essentially, once you've made the change on the master controller, you do show AAA user delete all, and that will clear off all of the sessions, force everybody to get off the Wi-Fi and rejoin, and then they will get the new role that you assign. Okay, so that's another big tangent I went on to explain the installation of the PFNG license. So let's get back on track. Okay, so I've gone over this. Bring up my cheat sheet. Alright, firmware upgrade, license adding. Okay, where to put licenses? So in the last few years, Aruba added a feature called centralized licensing. Back in the old days, you had to have licenses installed on every controller to make sure that whatever failover scenario happened, the controller would have the amount of licenses that it needed to proceed. These days, they have what's called centralized licensing, which essentially takes all of the licenses available in a master local hierarchy and puts them all into one giant pool. Okay, so that means all of the licenses on both master controllers and every local controller go into one big pool, and every controller can pull from that pool as needed. Okay. So where do you, given that, where do you put the licenses? I used to say just put them all on one master controller because it's just going to be easier to see all of them in one place. I've changed my mind on that. So now I say distribute licenses all over the place. Okay, it's still going to go into one giant pool, but just in case, let's say for example your WAN link goes down or your IPSec tunnel to the master controller goes down for whatever other reason, and that controller reloads, it doesn't know what licenses were available. So if it has a few licenses locally installed, it can use those. Okay. And I'll kind of cover that again when we configure centralized licensing in a future video. Okay, and as far as the show rights command, this is all of the available use roles. I meant to actually show you before and after. I forgot to, but basically you wouldn't have seen any of these user type of roles. You would have only seen system roles, and adding the PEFNG license added all of those roles, and they now also appear in the show run begin user role. Okay, all of these user roles with the session-based access list were not here before. You'll have to take my word because I forgot to show you that, but they were not here before, and adding the PEFNG license unlocked them. Let's call it that. Let's see, before and after. Warned about adding PEF in production. I did that. Okay, we've gone through. You know what? Did I turn on LLDP? Let me double check. LLDP transmit, LLDP receive, but for some reason I'm not getting that. Let me I'm going to pause the video and do some offline troubleshooting. Okay, so I was not able to determine why the LLDP is not showing up. However, I will just put it out there that during some of these initial setups that I've done, sometimes not everything quite works until I do my reboot. Okay, remember I did a lot of things that required a reboot. In fact, there was one time that I changed the IP address of the controller IP address, I mean, and then it just couldn't ping, no matter what. The route switch settings were correct, and all I had to do was write mem and reload, and the ping started working again. So I'm going to hope that after a reload that'll work, and we'll check that. But in the meantime, let's see, one thing I forgot to do. You can see I still have an IP address on VLAN 1. I want to get rid of that. Alright, so this is a good opportunity to demonstrate command chaining. So there's no need to actually go all the way in. So if rather than saying config t, enter, interface, interface VLAN 1, enter, no IP address. Instead, I could be all the way out in exec mode and say config terminal, interface VLAN 1, no IP address. Okay, and that took it. And you can actually see that now. Show IP interface brief. Okay, and I got rid of that that IP address. And I could do the exact same thing if I am in config mode. Let's, for example, do the exact same one. Interface VLAN 1, no IP address. Okay, you can chain the commands together. So that makes it a little easier if you want to take some shortcuts. Let's say no interface VLAN 1, get rid of that completely. Show IP interface brief. Alright, so now only VLAN 20 is there. Show controller IP, and it's set to VLAN 20, that's good. Okay, okay, so now, one thing I want to, let's go all the way back to licenses, because I didn't finish that discussion. Where do the license certificates get sent? When you buy licenses, how do you get them? Okay, when your order gets submitted either directly to Aruba or to your Aruba partner, part of that order form that the inside salesperson is going to complete is a contact email address. Now typically they're just going to take the email address of the person who signed the PO and put that in as the contact email address, but if you want something different, for example, if you want it to go to a distribution list at your company, you have to make sure that the contact email address is set to that email address, okay? And that way the licenses will get sent to that distribution list instead, okay? So you'll get the certificate keys, but those certificate keys can't be installed directly on the controller. Instead, you need to activate the certificates. So before I was, before I started recording this video, I was doing a dry run, and I tried to go to, let's type it in, try to go to, actually I have the tab open, I tried to go to licensing.arubanetworks.com, and I hit this information page. Now licensing.arubanetworks.com is the page that you used to go to activate your certificates. But they've since deprecated the system starting November 1st, 2016, and now you have to go to the HPE My Networking portal. So I click there, and let's go ahead and where do I go? Where do I go? HPE Networking, maybe. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to pause and make sure that I'm going to the right place. Okay, so from here, from the licensing page, I'm just going to click on the HP page. It brings me here. Let's go to Tools and Resources. Oh, sorry, I actually wanted to sign in. There was a sign in button on the previous page, but I can sign in here as well. And I'm going to hide the screen while I enter my credentials. Alright, so that brought me to this page called My Networking, where I can say registered license. And now from this page I can take the certificate ID and I can paste it directly into this field. So let's go. Now these were, I had to call the HP support, and they gave me these certificates for evaluation purposes. It used to be, since I work for an Aruba partner, I was able to generate my own evaluation certificates. At least at this exact point in time on November 18th, that is not the case. So I had to get support to send me some eval certificates. So I'll just go ahead and copy these certificate keys into here, and I'll hit next. So that brought me to this page where I will have the, it tells me I can get 3 AP licenses for a controller. I just need the serial number, and I'm going to activate those on my other master controller. I made a note of what the serial number was. In case you want to find your serial number and you're on the command line, you can just type show inventory, and it's right here, system serial number. This is different because I'm using a I'm actually going to activate the licenses for my master controller rather than the local controller. But anyway, so I'll put in my serial number. Now one important thing to remember is that you have to append ARB for Aruba at the end of the serial number. That's actually a little note that they made on the previous page. Licensing. Right here it says Aruba product serial number. You have to add the additional suffix of ARB when you're activating the licenses. So I got the ARB, and friendly name. This is just for your own information so you can keep track of your licenses. So I'm going to call that this license is going to be activated on CTN master controller 1. I'll just put in some notes. Location is San Francisco data center. You can put in whatever you want, obviously. This is just for you to keep track of. So I clicked next, and it brought me to the next page where I'm able to click any of these dates and have a reminder set. It looks like it's going to have it by default send me a reminder on December 4th and 14th before the license finally expires on December 19th. But I can turn off that reminder if I don't want it. So I'll go ahead and hit next. Okay, terms and conditions, check. Okay, and finally it brought me to this this page where it actually gives me the license key that I used to install it, and I can put in my email address here if I want to have it send me the key to my email address, but I'll skip that, and I'll just go ahead and take this key. Hopefully it's the same syntax. I haven't actually done this in my dry run, so we're going to learn on the spot. Okay, Go back to exec mode so I can add licenses. License, add, paste. Failed to decrypt key. Alright, I have to do some offline troubleshooting. Back to Super Putty. Alright, license adding. Alright, and I'm basically close to the end here. So before I commit this, well, first of all, let me make the comment that any command that you enter commits in real time. There's no commit keyword like you would see with Juniper. So if you change an IP address or something, or some route switch settings in real time, that's going to happen immediately. So just be careful, be aware of that. But the command to actually write them to the startup config is write memory, again similar to Cisco. But before I do that, I want to look at all the commands that I've done up to this point. So to do that, do show configuration diff, and this is all of the commands that I entered up until this exact point since I last did write mem. Now this is really useful because I can actually take this and I can put it into Notepad. Let's see, where do I want to put it? How about a new one? And I could use this with some slight modifications to make it very quick to stand up my next controller. Okay, I do have to, but remember, it showed me all of the commands. So when I did the spanning tree command, for example, for some reason that's not showing. Not the one I want it to show anyway. But you know, every time I turned on a command or turned off a command, that gets written into this show configuration diff output. So just remember, that's going to require a little bit of tweaking. And then I did another example here. I did the interface range command, but it actually broke it out. So just be careful. Now it's also not showing me everything, because I've also done a few other commands here. So if I want to see all of the commands since this controller last rebooted, I can do the command show audit-trail. Now this output's a little bit messier, but it will tell me every command and who ran the command, and the timestamp, and let's see what else, and whether or not it was in exec mode or config mode. So this actually shows me a few other things, like for example, here's when I did the firmware download, and when I added licenses, so, and also when I set the clock right here, somewhere in here, clock set, there it is. So in this mode, basically every command other than like show commands, every command that actually has some sort of impact on the controller gets logged. So that's the audit trail. And I'm going to use this, and I'm going to make some modifications to this output that I got from show configuration diff, and that's going to help me stand up my second mobility controller. Let me just make sure I covered all my warnings, because I wrote a few of them down. I talked about the management interface. I did the PEF-NG license. All right, that's basically everything I wanted to cover in this video. Thanks for watching. This is Configure This Now. I hope you enjoyed it.